Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into a Thursday, February 16th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We're streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, as well as, of course, dailyfaceoff.com. He's former NHL player, current Chicago Blackhawks analyst, and my friend, Colby Cohen. Colby, how you doing?
Good. I like the intro today. You slipped in the old friendship tag. I like it.
Hey, we go back a long ways. Got to do that. It's it's hilarious. You and I are the same age, and I still get these tweets. I got a tweet the other day from someone that said, "Hey, look, Frank Seravalli is younger than Connor Bedard," and I'm like, "Really?" Like, all right. So here we go. I may look a little bit older, but nonetheless, Colby, we've got a lot to dive into. Jokes aside, let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock, and let's start with the New York Rangers, because the early returns from the Vladimir Tarasenko trade have certainly given the Blue Shirts a shot in the arm. And when you look at the impact that one trade has had, not just energizing Vladimir Tarasenko, who's played well since arriving at Madison Square Garden, but also the idea of it lifting the rest of that team. One, give me what it's like to be on a team that gets an addition like that. What does it do to the room and to the spirit of everyone? And two, could you foresee a world in which the Rangers then go to add more, because we saw how aggressive their GM and Chris Drury was previously?
Well, first of all, Frank, I think it gives the whole dressing room the notion that we're all in here. We're trying to win. We're not thinking about the future, and we're living in the present. And when you feel that that type of confidence coming from the general manager and coming from up top, it changes the complexity of everything. It makes you feel a little bit more invincible. It makes you feel like, okay, they believe in us. This is the year that we can win. And on top of Tarasenko, you get a little bit of size on the back end with Mikkola. And I know you and I differ a little bit on our opinions on that part of the trade, but look, Frank, if I'm the Rangers, I am not done. I'm still out there looking, especially going through your trade board that you've been putting up, and some of the names that kind of really stick out to me, guys that are interesting, are guys like Ivan Barbashev, guys like Nola Chari, a guy like maybe Nick Bukestad. I'd like to see the Rangers get a little bit more size in the back of their forward lineup, add a little bit of depth. One other guy that I looked at was Lawson Krause from the Arizona Coyotes. Now, he makes like $4.5 million, and he does have term, but Arizona could eat a little bit of that. They could ask for a first-round pick. They could ask for Kravitzov. They could ask for maybe Zach Jones from Hartford. He's a young defenseman who I don't think the Rangers would mind parting with if the right deal came about. So, yeah, if I'm Chris Drury, I'm looking at the way this team has gelled, adding a guy like Tarasenko, and I'm looking at opportunities to maybe challenge my top nine, maybe bring in a forward that could battle with Jimmy Vesey for that role on the second line, or potentially slot into the fourth line, add a little bit of depth, add a little bit of grittiness. I don't know. Sam Lafferty seems to be a pretty popular guy these days, the way he's playing in the bottom of the lineup. So I like your trade board, Frank, and I think there are a number of forwards that are reasonable adds financially and otherwise that could help the Rangers.
Yeah, the new trade targets board has been posted on dailyfaceoff.com. 45 names in play, including 7 newcomers today. We'll discuss that a little bit later in the show with our icebreaker segment. And Colby, as you pointed out, the New York Rangers have mostly still kept a lot of their assets intact even after the Tarasenko and Mikkola trade, because they had that extra first-round pick from the Nils Lundkvist trade. The St. Louis Blues get the lower of the Dallas Stars first round pick or the Rangers. So if the Rangers wanted to, they could still go out and trade another first round pick to add to their team. Not sure that they need to swing that big, but as we mentioned, Chris Drury traded for 4 players last year at the deadline, and all 4 of them were rentals who ended up walking in the summer for nothing. Let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs and Austin Matthews, who makes his return to the lineup, or made his return to the lineup, I should say, on Wednesday night. Colby, in a game that you watched, it was his first game back after missing 5 as a result of the knee injury. He gets on the scoreboard with an important goal as the Leafs roll with a 5-2 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. When you look at Matthews and his game on Wednesday night, what did you see? And is a rested and healthier Austin Matthews a scary proposition for the rest of the NHL in what's been a rather pedestrian season for him to this point?
Look, this is a guy who can hurt you at any minute of any game. So arrested and a healthy Austin Matthews should scare the rest of the NHL. It does not take a lot of time and space for him to make his impact on the game. He did score the game-winning goal in a game that Toronto controlled from the get-go. Let's not kid ourselves. For anybody who watched that game, you're talking about one of the elite teams versus a rebuilding team in the basement. But, when I watched Austin Matthews play last night, something that probably impressed me a little bit more, and he even talked about this in the post-game interview, his game seems to be maturing. I think that there's plays throughout the game where he's realizing he doesn't have to score every shift. He doesn't have to make a high-risk play every shift. You see him getting above the puck defensively. I saw probably half a dozen times where he made good defensive plays in the neutral zone just by being in the right position. And that allows his defense an opportunity to keep their gaps up in the play. It transitions the puck into other skilled forwards' hands. And so I just think we're seeing a completeness from his game. I think Alexander Ovechkin, and yes, they're much different players, went through this at a certain point in his career where he said, look, yes, I'm dynamic, I can score, but if I want to win a cup, I've got to round out my game, and I'm on the ice a lot, and I got to do other things, Frank. So I was impressed with the way Matthews looked last night.
How did the Maple Leafs look as a whole to you? I know that the Hawks have had a couple tough games in a row, especially this week. But when you look at this Leaf team and you see the contributions again from some of their younger guys on the blue line, Sandin, Timmins, how did they look overall in terms of a threat coming out of the Atlantic?
I still worry a little bit about their back end. I really do. I do think they have some good young players. I like the way that they move the puck. But when you watch them down low and you watch them struggle on certain plays to, execute defensive stops against the Chicago Blackhawks, a team that have had a difficult time scoring all year, I think they struggled on the rush a little bit last night, Frank. The Hawks were able to get a couple rush goals. So I still think the Kyle Dubas and company should be looking to add. I think they still need some defensive help, some grittiness maybe. A guy like Jake McCabe, I think, would fit in pretty nicely there in Toronto. So TBD on that. But ultimately, they look like a good team, but I think they need to be a little bit active.
Yeah, and I think they will be. I think they're also looking at a forward right now. When you look at the cap space and the assets that the Leafs have, they might be able to add both. And we know from Kyle Dubas and his press conference recently that they're tending to not lean towards rentals, would like players with terms. They'd like to hang on to their top prospect in Matt Nyes. And if all things are equal, they'd like to keep their first round pick as well. Will all of those things be possible and the Leafs add? Well, we've got 15 days until the NHL's trade deadline on March 3rd. Let's talk about the Arizona Coyotes because there's been lots of consternation, Colby, over the last number of days about the idea of keeping Jakob Chychrun out of the lineup until a trade materializes. We know that he's sitting for asset protection. It makes sense. There's been lots of conspiracy theories. Did Jakob Chychrun get banged up in his last game? A slight tweak that, all of a sudden had the team worried to say, hey, let's just take our time here and sit this player out. It's in the best interest of both the Coyotes and Chychrun, who is also looking to move on. But the team, for any claim that, they're just doing this to also tank at the same time, the Arizona Coyotes have just continued to win. They've won 2 in a row now, 5, 2, and 3 in their last 10, Kolb. And when you look at the play of Connor Ingram in net, he gets his first career NHL shutout on Wednesday night, 47 saves. It is the most saves by any goaltender in his first shutout in NHL history. What a night for Ingram, but more importantly, what a night for the Coyotes, who continued to play hard against all odds. Give me the player's perspective on what it's like to see a player sitting out for this long. Do you agree or disagree with it? And how long is too long to keep a player out?
So I did his last game before he started sitting. They just so happened to be in Chicago, and I was between the benches. So I had this great up-close view of him. I mean, he played probably 31 or 32 minutes that night, and I do not remember seeing him get injured. I do not remember seeing any points of contact where anything could have looked not good. He was out in overtime, up and down the ice. I'm talking 30-plus minutes. So, I'm not a huge fan of the fact that they're sitting him out this early. Now, I understand if you have something that's at the red zone and you want to pull him out. But when you realize that it's not at the red zone and you're still exploring options, I do think this is too long to sit out. I think it creates a little bit of distraction amongst the players. Listen, I get it. I'm not a GM, right? I don't have a GM brain. I've never been a general manager. I understand they got to protect their assets, but I think this was a little bit premature. I think maybe you sit him for a game because he played 30 plus minutes and then you put him back in there the next night. We've been talking about Jacob Chychrun getting traded for how many years? I mean, this is like the saga that never ends. So, I think that too soon. I think it creates a distraction. I think there's other teams that are also in this mix of, having a lot of players that are available. Look, I work in Chicago. It's no secret. Plenty of guys are probably available. They're still playing right now because I think it's too soon, creates too much distraction, and can mess with your culture.
Yeah, interesting perspective. I tend to agree, and I think we all have some legitimate Jacob Chychrun fatigue. I went back and actually watched portions of our trade deadline show from last year. Tyler did such a great job hosting for that 3+ hour show, and I realized then that Jacob Chychrun was still in our top 10 of our trade targets last year. He's all the way up to number 2 on this year's trade targets board. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Kings and Mikey Anderson, who gets a big boy extension from the Kings, an 8-year deal, $4+ million, $32+ million in his bank account moving forward. You see the AAV there, 4.125. And when you take a look at this player card, the most interesting thing is actually in the bottom right corner, in that Mikey Anderson is a left shot defenseman. I had an NHL general manager refer to the Kings this week as the NHL's bullpen for right shooting defensemen, and they do have a pair of right shooting defensemen in Matt Roy and Sean Walker on our trade targets board, Colby, which we'll talk about more in depth in a second. But when you look at Anderson and his game, how significant is having a proper left and right balance when you're constructing a team's blue line? Because it's not just Doughty and Roy and Walker. It's also, you've got Sean Durzi playing on his offside on the left. You've got Jordan Spence waiting in the wings in the minors, who's been a point per game defenseman for the AHL Ontario Reign. That it kind of has created this logjam here, that the way I view this Anderson extension being significant is it gives them some significant cost control on the left side. Then if they were able to go out and add someone like a Chychrun, because they've been rumored and connected to that would sort of solidify for the next number of years the left side of your defense to the point where you're better balanced and can go out and move a couple of the guys on your right side. How do you see it, and what have you noticed from Anderson when you've seen him?
Well, first off, we just had LA in town recently, so got an up close, view on him as a defenseman, and I think the numbers right. I think it signifies who he is, what he does. He's reliable. He moves the puck well. He can sort of play in all different areas. So good for him getting this contract. I've had viewings on this kid back to his days at Minnesota Duluth doing his Frozen Four. He's a winner. He's been on championship teams. I think that's important. So I like the contract and I like the move. But Frank, I'm a little different when it comes to this whole left shot, right shot thing. And it's funny, a lot of old school coaches, which, I would think Todd McClellan kind of is, they love this left, right shot thing. It's really important to them. Going back to when I was in my first training camp with Claude Julien, it was really important to him. Now, personally, the way hockey players are learning and the skill that they're learning now, puck handling, all the skill work, to me, left shot, right shot doesn't matter as much. You're comfortable on your backhand. You've got the puck skills to be on your backhand. I personally played my offside all of college because I played with the right shot, Kevin Shattenkirk, for 3 years. I got really comfortable on my left. Then when I moved to my right, it was uncomfortable. Luke Richardson says it doesn't bother him at all. He played 1,500 games in the NHL. So I just don't think the lefty-righty thing is as important as it's been made out to be.
I understand. I just think the Kings are also dealing with sort of an embarrassment of riches, in the sense that a lot of teams, because of, I don't even think it's an old school mentality. I think it's a current mentality that a lot of teams do value having the proper lefty righty split, and right shot guys are so much harder to find that it makes sense, if you can, to trade one of those players, especially Walker or Roy, who are not trending you in the championship caliber direction. Not to say that they're bad players by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that you have some surplus and some value there that you might as well take advantage of, give you some assets that you can then use to go get something else, or use those in a trade. We talked about the trade targets board. We've been hinting at it. Let's get there now in this week's edition of Icebreakers.
Yeah, well, Frank, I'm going to take your hat here for a minute, and I'm going to pepper some questions your way because you're the one writing all the trade boards, and we're going to have to start with the fact that your new trade board debuted today on BaileyFaceoff.com, and Jonathan Toews has tumbled out of the top 10. This is the first time in a while he hasn't been there. What's the latest surrounding Jonathan Toews in Chicago?
Yeah, I think Colby teams have really been concerned about his illness and his status. When you look at the sheer amount of time missed already to this point, it's been 6 games. He's not expected to rejoin the team as they culminate their trip in Ottawa. And that makes it 7 games. But more importantly, he's a guy that hasn't been skating a lot. And so you see him bump down to the number 11 spot. He was previously at 5. And I think when you have a player, it's not so much the concern of this current illness, it's more so the history that's existed there. When you think back to him missing the entire 2020-21 season as a result of his chronic immune disorder and also potentially some long COVID related stuff that's been going on, that raises an eyebrow with teams because they're saying, what is our reliability moving forward? And then also, are we getting a player, if we were to spend the assets, that is close to 100% or someone that can compete at the high level Jonathan Toews type place that we're used to seeing him? So I think it's probably not fair at this point to say that it's impossible that Jonathan Toews will be traded, but I think it's a significant long shot, and the odds increase the longer that Toews is off the ice, as teams really just are concerned about where his status is with regards to his illness.
Yeah, all very fair sentiments. Being here ago, it's been strange not seeing him out and at practice and around the team. So that's one that we'll just have to wait on, and it'll probably go right up into the deadline. All right, so the next one caught me by surprise a little bit. I've been looking at the trade boards that you've been putting up. Today, newcomer Carson Soucy on the board at number 8. He comes into the top 10. Seattle's a playoff team. They've been one of the better teams this year. They've been a big surprise. Why is Carson Soucy now in the top 10 on your trade board?
Yeah, it actually surprised me a little bit, Colby, to hear his name, but I think where the Seattle Kraken are is an incredibly healthy and envious place to be if you are the opposition, because they're in a spot where Carson Soucy has significant value. There's lots of teams that are interested in trying to get their hands on a 6'5" defenseman who makes $2.75 million a year and is a pending unrestricted free agent. I don't think there's been much by way of contract extension talks. And so the Kraken have arrived at this point in time where they say, should we try and recoup an asset for Carson Soucy? And I believe that it could be a significant one. I think they're in first round pick territory if Carson Soucy is potentially on the move. And where they're at in the standings, they're on pace for 100 points, depending on where you look and you get your information, whether it's hockeyviz.com or moneypuck.com. They have somewhere between an 85 and 94% chance to make the playoffs. I think a lot would need to go wrong at this point with how many points the Kraken have racked up in order for them to miss. And so to take a guy who's played second or third pair minutes this season, averaging just about 16, it's probably not going to change both their playoff odds and their odds to win a series all that much. And so if they can maybe sell on Soucy, get a significant asset in return, and then either use that or use other pieces to then go out and bolster this team elsewhere, there's maybe this, sort of fun spot to be in if you're Ron Francis, where you'd consider just about anything. And I'm told at this point from sources around the league that the Kraken are willing to do just that. They're happy to keep Soucy if it comes down to that, but they're also willing to entertain some ideas and entrees there.
Well, a 6'5" defenseman who makes 2.75 and has played in the top 4 on a playoff contending team this year, I would think that would be highly valuable around the NHL. We will have to see what happens there. All right, the next one, always a little bit of a head scratcher for me. It seems like every time I'm on here, we're talking about the Vancouver Canucks. What are you hearing, Frank? What's going to happen with Brock Boeser? He remains inside your top 10 on your draft board, on your trade board. Do they even know what's going on there in Vancouver? I don't know.
They do, and they're pretty antsy, I think, Colby, to make something happen. So what I'm told, the big question surrounding Brock Boeser has been, how will the Canucks make this happen? He's got 2 more years on his deal at $6.65 million. He's actually on pace for 61 points over a full 82 game season. He's just not scoring goals at the rate that we would typically expect from Brock Boeser. Everyone knows that a change of scenery is in order. Boeser's prepared for it. The Canucks are prepared for it, but how will they handle that contract with the term, which has been a sticking point with teams? And I'm told today that teams believe that the Vancouver Canucks are willing to entertain the idea of retaining some salary on Brock Boeser. I don't think it's going to be a lot, probably somewhere in the million, maybe a little bit more than that range if they can do it. And that's in order for the Canucks to potentially get a better return for Brock Boeser. I don't know what that return looks like. It's maybe in the second round pick territory. However, I will say, and keep an eye on, the Canucks have wanted NHL-ready roster players 25 and under. The need to create salary cap flexibility is real, and I think it starts with Brock Boeser. And so they're working and trying to find a way to alleviate some of their salary cap constraints. And one other name to keep an eye on from Vancouver, Nils Höglander joins our trade targets board. I think it's probably a bit of a long shot that he ends up moving, but he is one player that teams have had interest in, and the Canucks have made it very simple. Tell us who you want and let's talk, because they are open to lots of new ideas in Vancouver.
Well, nothing surprising there. I think you bring in Rick Tocchet. You want to get some younger NHL-ready players. Let him start molding them the way he sees fit. Give him a real opportunity to coach there in Vancouver. And the last one here, Frank, that I got for you today, this is a guy that I really like watching. I get to see him up close and personal since they traded Kyle Davidson in the Chicago Blackhawks. They brought Sam Lafferty in last season. They traded Nylander. He's been in the American League ever since. This is a huge win for Kyle Davidson. A great job by the scouting staff. You know, he bumps up a couple spots on your board from 14 to 12, scored a goal last night on national TV against the Toronto Maple Leafs. What's going on with Sam Lafferty? What's the interest like? What are teams saying? And what might he return for the Chicago Blackhawks?
Well, there's been lots of interest. Teams have been on the horn with the Chicago Blackhawks to try and find out what that asking price is. And from speaking to teams around the league, I believe the asking price is a second round pick. It's not just the goal that he scored, it's the 3 shorthanded goals that he scored this year, second in the league to only Riley Smith of the Vegas Golden Knights. And so they view his elite speed, his penalty killing ability as significant assets to be a contributor. And plus, that 1 more year at just $1.15 million is extremely attractive to teams to plug him into the bottom 6. So when you look at the potential return for Chicago and the ability to flip that asset from Alex Nylander in a basically AHL salary dump into a player that could bring you back a second round pick, that's the ask. We'll see which team is ready to step up and take it. And Colby, that'll wrap our trade targets talk on Icebreakers today, which is delivered by our friends at Montana's. Montana's is bringing back the viewing party all season long. They've got their comfort menu, which has been fantastic, and they've also got their daily deals ongoing. On social media, head on over to the Daily Faceoff Instagram and Twitter pages. We've got a $100 Montana's gift card up for grabs. And that Montana's gift card could go a long way when you consider those daily deals. All you can eat ribs, $5 tacos, lots of different options to get your hands on at Montana's. Head on over to the Daily Faceoff Instagram page, tag the respective show and Montana's in a photo of your crew on Instagram, and you could win $100. The draw date is tomorrow, February 17th. Also, head over to montanas.ca for more information on their comfort menu and daily deals. All right, Colby, it's time for our Daily Faceoff inbox question of the day. Hashtag AskDFO. We'd be happy to take your questions. So this is actually a Canucks-centered question, and it comes from our guy, Arpin. And he says, how many more Canucks players are dealt by the deadline? Colby, what would you handicap that at?
It's a tough one. You know, I don't know. I would say maybe 3 or 4. I think maybe I would probably look in that range. That might be a little bit high, but ultimately I think when teams start to feel the heat and see what other teams are doing, I think those phones will start ringing. And I think the Vancouver Canucks, as you said earlier, are an attractive option to call.
Yeah, so I'm going to set the over-under at 1.5. I would say probably leaning toward the under. I think Boeser is the guy to go. However, I mentioned Höglander, and also keep an eye on JT Miller. Not enough smoke yet to put him on the trade targets board, but I can tell you from talking to some teams that their internal discussions have certainly brought up the name JT Miller, and for the Canucks to be able to potentially make that move before his no trade clause kicks in with his new contract on July 1st, well, if they have any thoughts of moving him, they would be wise to do it sooner rather than later. Thanks to Arpin for our inbox question of the day. That brings us to Tyler Yaremchuk and our daily Faceoff Points Bet daily bet segment. Tyler, what do you got?
It was a sweep last night, by the way, Frank. I've been doing so bad this year. We really got to celebrate the good night. So I went a perfect 2 for 2 last night. I got 3 plays for tonight, so let's dig into it, courtesy of our friends at Pointsbet Canada, starting with a matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Washington Capitals, where I not only like the Florida Panthers to win this hockey game at -131, no Ovi for Washington. You're going to give me a Panthers team that is maybe starting to figure things out at a decent price. I'm taking them on the road, and then I'm also taking right there that Carter Verhaeghe shot prop. He has hit this in 4 of his last 5, 8 of his last 10, and he has not dipped below 2 shots on goal in either of the games that he's missed this prop. He's been crushing it, and you're giving me almost even money on something that's happened in 8 of his last 10. Like I said, that is an auto bet for me. And another player prop going out to one of the highest team totals on the slate. It's the Jets taking on the Blue Jackets, and I'm actually going with another player prop, and it's a Nikolai Ehlers assist, paying out at a very nice +120. He's done this in 3 straight games, and I think the Jets are going to be able to keep the offense going. So +120 on the Ehlers assist, the Verhaeghe shot prop, and the Panthers on the money line, Frank.
Nice work to Tyler for our Points Bet daily bet segment. Thanks so much to Tyler and Colby. That brings us to garbage time. And typically I would cede the floor to you, but in this case, wanted to pass along some sad news and offer our condolences to the family of University of Nebraska Omaha assistant coach Paul Gerard, a trailblazer assistant coach who coached at some of the highest levels as one of the very few Black prominent coaches in hockey. Gerard passed away on Wednesday. The Omaha Mavericks announced at the age of 57 after a quiet but long-term battle with cancer. Certainly some sad news. He spent a long time on the staff of Glenn Gulletson in both Dallas and as well as the Calgary Flames. Spent a little bit of time with the Colorado Avalanche back in 2002-03 and at the NCAA level as well. So from the Daily Faceoff family, sending our condolences to Paul Gerard. The impact that you see just from people around the hockey world, some friends and scouts, Rod Braceful, for instance, a friend of mine who scouts for the Chicago Blackhawks. Coincidentally enough, I saw him post on Instagram earlier today. Thank you to Paul for paving the way for others in the game. Thanks to Colby Cohen. Thanks to Tyler Yaremchuk. Thanks to our head of production, Alex Allard. That'll do it for today's edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We'll be back with you on Friday at 12 noon Eastern. You know where to find us. Until then, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.